Hello students, welcome to readmedprep Academy channel. Today in Ecosystem Part 3, we are going to discuss about the functions of the ecosystem Part 2. In this we will talk about the decomposition, nutrient cycles, types of ecosystem, ecosystem services and ecosystem management. First let us move on to the decomposition. What is decomposition? Decomposition is a process in which the detritus, the dead plants, animals and the excreta are broken down into simple organic matter by the decomposers. It is an essential process for recycling and balancing the nutrient pool in the ecosystem. Who are the decomposers? The soil fauna like the earthworms and the arthropods. They cause fragmentation, which increases the surface area and distributes the organic material within the soil profile. The soil microorganisms like the heterotrophic bacteria, the fungi, which derive energy, carbon and nutrients from the dead organic matter. In the process, they release the carbon dioxide through respiration. What is the nature of decomposition? The process of decomposition varies based on the nature of the organic compounds. That is, some of the compounds like carbohydrate, fat and protein are decomposed rapidly than some substances like cellulose, lignin, chitin, hair and bone. What is the mechanism of decomposition? Decomposition is a stepwise process of degradation mediated by enzymatic reactions. Detritus acts as a raw material for the decomposition. It occurs in the following steps like the fragmentation, catabolism, leaching or alleviation, humidification and mineralization. What is fragmentation? The breaking down of the detritus into smaller particles by detritivores like the bacteria, fungi and earthworm is known as fragmentation. These detritivores secrete certain substances to enhance the fragmentation process and increase the surface area of the detritus particles. What is catabolism? The decomposers produce some extracellular enzymes in their surroundings to break down the complex organic and inorganic compounds into simpler ones. This is called catabolism. Leaching or alleviation, the movement of the decomposed water-soluble organic and inorganic compounds from the surface layer of the soil to the lower layers of the soil or carrying away of the substances same by water is called leaching or alleviation. So leaching is the removal of minerals that have been dissolved in water. When it rains, the water picks up the minerals and carries them down from the A horizon to the B horizon. C horizon will hardly ever have minerals. You can see in the image on the right side where the minerals go down by leaching into the B horizon and the C horizon is free of the minerals. What is humidification? It's a process by which simplified detritus is changed into dark colored amorphous substance called humus. It is highly resistant to microbial action. Therefore, decomposition is a very slow process. It is the reservoir of nutrients. Humidification is the breakdown of the plant remains leading to the formation of different types of humus. It is probably the most important biological process taking place in the soil. Three types of humus are found: mull humus, modder humus and moor humus. Mull humus develops under deciduous woodland where base-rich plant remains are actively broken down by a prolific soil biota. Modder humus is intermediate between the moor and the mull humus. Moor humus usually develops beneath the coniferous woodland or healthier moorland under cool, wet climatic conditions. Breakdown is slow due to the absence of soil biota. What is mineralization? Some microbes are involved in the release of inorganic nutrients from the humus of the soil. Such process is called mineralization. Here you can see that the detritus under the environmental conditions and by the heterotrophic and other bacteria and fungi undergoes fragmentation, leaching and catabolism. And this further causes humidification or the formation of the humus. And this also leads to mineralization where the formation of carbon dioxide occurs, water occurs and lot of nutrients are formed in the soil. What is the difference between the immobilization and mineralization? Mineralization, the organic nitrogen which occurs in many forms, is broken down into inorganic nitrogen like the ammonium ions. Whereas in immobilization, the inorganic nitrogen in the form of ammonium ions and nitrates are again reversed back to organic nitrogen of many forms. To sum up, the diagrammatic representation, the process of decomposition and cycling of nutrients, initially the raw material for decomposition is got from the detritus. and it undergoes senescence and fragmentation, where there are small particles are formed, and it undergoes catabolism. This catabolism leads on to leaching, and leaching forms humidification, and humidification results in formation of mineralization, and these minerals are again absorbed by the plants and the cycle continues. What are the factors that affect the decomposition? Decomposition is affected by the climatic factors like the temperature, soil moisture, soil pH, oxygen, chemical quality of the detritus. Now let us move on to the nutrient cycle or the biogeochemical cycle. Exchange of nutrients occurs between the organism and the environment, which is one of the essential aspects of an ecosystem. All organisms require nutrients for their growth, development, maintenance, and reproduction. Circulation of nutrients within the ecosystem or biosphere is known as the biogeochemical cycles and also called as cycling of materials. There are two basic types of cycles, gaseous cycle and sedimentary cycle. Gaseous cycle includes the atmospheric oxygen, carbon and nitrogen cycles. The sedimentary cycle includes the cycles of phosphorus, sulfur and calcium, which are present as sediments of the earth. Now let us move on to the carbon cycle. The circulation of carbon between the organisms and the environment is known as the carbon cycle. Carbon is an inevitable part of all biomolecules and is substantially impacted by the change in the global climate. Cycling of carbon between organisms and the atmosphere is a consequence of two reciprocal processes of photosynthesis and respiration. The releasing of carbon in the atmosphere increases due to the burning of the fossil fuels, deforestation, forest fire, volcanic eruption and decomposition of dead organic matters. Here in this image you can see the diagrammatic sketch showing the carbon cycle, where the fossil fuels like the plant, the coal and the oil and the gases undergo combustion in the factories and the industries, releasing the atmospheric carbon dioxide. The animals and the plants which take up oxygen and release a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The plants take up the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by the process of photosynthesis and results in the formation of starch in the presence of sunlight. The dead organic matter that is present in the soil transports some matter to the water bodies or sometimes release large amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The forest fires also release the atmospheric carbon dioxide. The volcanic eruptions also release large amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The dead organic matter, which is formed by the decomposition and also forms as sediments in the water bodies, undergoes release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The decomposition of the dead organic matter results in diffusion of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The animals that are present in the water bodies undergo respiration and release large amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The phytoplanktons and the plants that are present in the water bodies undergo photosynthesis and release large amount of atmospheric carbon dioxide. Sea grasses and mangroves of the estuarine and the coastal ecosystem are the most efficient in carbon sequestration. Hence, these ecosystems are called as blue carbon ecosystems. They are not properly utilized and maintained all over the world, although they have rich bioresources potential. Now, let us move on to the phosphorus cycle. It is a type of sedimentary cycle. Already we know that phosphorus is found in the biomolecules like the DNA, RNA, ATP, NADP and phospholipid molecules of the living organisms. Phosphorus is not abundant in the biosphere, whereas a bulk quantity of phosphorus is present in the rock deposits, marine sediments and guano. What is this guano? It is an accumulated excrement of seabirds and bats. Phosphorus is released from these deposits by weathering process. After that, it circulates in lithosphere as well as the hydrosphere. The producers absorb phosphorus in the form of phosphate ions, and then it is transferred to each trophic level of food chain through food. Again, death of the organisms and degradation by the action of the decomposers, the phosphorus is released back into the lithosphere and the hydrosphere to maintain the phosphorus cycle. Here in this image, you can see the diagrammatic sketch of the phosphorus cycle, where P0 is represented as the organic phosphates and P1 represents the inorganic phosphates. The inorganic phosphates found in the rocks, the guano, as well as formed by the weathering processes are held in the urban and industrial factories and also in the agricultural industry for the manufacture of fertilizers. They are also used in the food industries. there is a lot of release of inorganic phosphorus into the water bodies. And these phosphorus that are formed are absorbed by the bacteria and the other organisms that are present in the water bodies, and sometimes the animals that are present in the water bodies cause excretion and formation of organic phosphates, or sometimes death of these organisms also causes release of organic phosphates. These organic phosphates that are formed even in the decomposition and mineralization process by the dead organic matter of the plants in the water bodies as well as the land are taken up by the plants, and these inorganic phosphates are again released by the dead and decaying organic matter. What are the types of ecosystem? Ecosystem is classified into natural ecosystem and artificial or man-made ecosystem. Natural ecosystem, which is with or without human interference, whereas artificial ecosystem, it's an artificial man-made ecosystem maintained by man. Example, rice fields and maize fields. The natural ecosystem is further classified into terrestrial ecosystem, example the forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystem and desert ecosystem. The aquatic ecosystem, which is the open water bodies. And the aquatic ecosystem is further classified into freshwater ecosystem and marine ecosystem. The freshwater ecosystem is the lotic ecosystem, which is the running water bodies, example the river, the springs and the streams. And the lentic ecosystem, which is the standing water bodies like the ponds and the lakes. Though there are many types of ecosystems, we are going to discuss here only about the pond ecosystem. When you take the structure of the pond ecosystem, it's a classical example for the natural, aquatic, freshwater, lentic type of ecosystem. It helps us to understand the structure and the function of an ecosystem. When rainwater gathers in a shallow area, gradually over a period of time, different kinds of organisms like the microbes, plants, animals become part of this ecosystem. This pond ecosystem is a self-sustaining and self-regulatory freshwater ecosystem, which shows a complex interaction between the abiotic and the biotic components in it. Here you can see the diagrammatic sketch of the pond ecosystem with the abiotic and the biotic components. You can see the producers which result in the production of food by photosynthesis, the different types of consumers and the decomposers that are present on the surface of the mud or in the water that helps in the degradation of the organic matter. Now, what are the abiotic components? A pond ecosystem consists of dissolved inorganic substances like the carbon dioxide, oxygen, calcium, nitrogen and phosphate, and organic substances like the amino acid and the humic acid formed from the dead organic matter. The function of the pond ecosystem is regulated by few factors like the amount of light, the temperature, the pH value of water and other climatic conditions. Now, what are the biotic components they constitute? The producers, variety of consumers and decomposers, which are the microorganisms. Now, what are the producers? A variety of phytoplanktons like Oscillatoria, Anabina, Eudorina, volvox and diatoms. Filamentous algae such as Ulothrix, Spirogyra, Cladophora and Eudogonium. Floating plants like Azolla, Salvia, Pistia, Wolffia and Ecornia. Submerged plants like Potamogeton and Phragmites. Rooted floating plants like Nymphia and Nelumbo. Macrophytes like Typha and Ipomia consider the major producers of a plant ecosystem. Now, consumers. The animals represent the consumers of a pond ecosystem, which include the zooplanktons like the paramecium and the daphnia, which are the primary consumers. Benthos, the bottom-living organisms or animals like the mollusks and the annelids. Secondary consumers like water beetles and frogs. Tertiary consumers like the carnivores like the duck, crane and some top carnivores, which include large fish, hawk, man, etc. Decomposers, they are also called as micro-consumers. They help in the recycle of the nutrients in the ecosystem. These are present in the mud, water and bottom of the ponds, example bacteria and fungi. Decomposers perform the process of decomposition in order to enrich the nutrients in the pond ecosystem. The cycling of the nutrients between the abiotic and the biotic components is evident in the pond ecosystem, making itself self-sufficient and self-regulating. Here you can see the pond ecosystem, the biotic factors on the left side and the abiotic factors. The biotic factors are classified into producers, consumers and decomposers. The producers like the algae and the hydrophytic plants, the consumers which are the primary, secondary, tertiary, the primary consumers like the protozoa and the crustacea, the secondary consumers like the insects and the larvae, and the tertiary consumers the fishes and the sharks. The decomposers like the bacteria, fungi and the microbes. The abiotic factors like the light, heat, water and minerals. And the pond is also classified into different layers from the surface like the littoral zone, the limnatic zone, the profundal zone and the benthic zone. And the humus is present at the bottom of the pond in the mud. What is limnology? It is the study of biological, chemical, physical and geological components of an inland freshwater aquatic ecosystems like the ponds, lakes, etc. What is oceanography? It is a study of biological, chemical and physical and geological components of an ocean. Based on the factors like the distance from the shore, penetration of the light, the depth of the water, types of plants and animals, there are 4 zones: littoral, limnatic, profundal and benthic. What is the littoral zone? It is the closest to the shore with shallow water region, allows easy penetration of light. It is warm and occupied by rooted plant species. The limnatic zone refers to the open water of the pond with an effective penetration of light and domination of planktons. The deeper region of a pond below the limnatic zone is called the profundal zone with no effective light penetration and predominance of heterotrophs. The bottom zone of a pond is termed benthic zone and is occupied by a community of organisms called benthos, usually the decomposers. The primary productivity through photosynthesis of the littoral and the limnatic zone is more due to the greater penetration of light than the profundal zone. Here you can see the diagrammatic sketch which shows the stratification of the pond ecosystem, where the sunlight is present which penetrates not deeper than the limnatic zone. You can see the littoral zone between the water body and the land, and on the surface is the limnatic zone. Below the limnatic zone is the profundal zone, and below the profundal zone is the benthic zone. The light composition level is between the limnatic zone and the profundal zone. Now let us move on to the ecosystem services or ecosystem benefits. Ecosystem services are defined as the benefits that people derive from nature. Robert Constanza et al. In 1927 stated that ecosystem services are the benefits provided to the human through the transformation of resources or environmental assets including land, water, vegetation and atmosphere into a flow of essential goods and services. Study on the ecosystem services acts as an effective tool for gaining knowledge on ecosystem, benefits and their sustained use. Without such knowledge gain, the fate of any ecosystem will be at stake and the benefits they provide to us in the future will become bleak. Robert Constanza and his colleagues estimated the value of global ecosystem services based on the various parameters. According to them, in 1997, the average global value of ecosystem services estimated was $33 trillion a year. The updated estimate for the total global ecosystem services in 2011 is $125 trillion per year, indicating a 4-fold increase in the ecosystem services from 1997 to 2011. What are the different types of ecosystem services? The varieties of benefits obtained from the ecosystem are generally categorized into the following 4 types, like the provisional services, cultural services, supporting services and regulating services. Provisioning services include the food, fiber, fuel, genetic resources, biochemicals, fresh water and medicines. Cultural services, spiritual and religious values, knowledge system, education and inspiration, recreation and aesthetic values and ecotourism. The supporting services, primary production, provision of habitat, nutrient cycling, soil formation and retention, production of atmospheric oxygen and water cycling. Regulating services, invasion resistance, herbivory pollination, seed dispersal, climate regulation, pest regulation, disease regulation, erosion regulation, water purification and natural hazard protection. Now let us move on to the mangrove ecosystem services. It offers habitat and acts as nursery for aquatic plants and animals, provides medicine, fuel, wood and timber, act as bridge between sea and rivers by balancing the sedimentation and soil erosion, help to reduce the water force during the cyclones, tsunamis and high tide periods, helps in the windbreak, oxygen production, carbon dioxide sequestration and prevents salt spray from waves. Now, what are the mangrove ecosystem services? Provisioning services like the food provisioning, water provisioning, raw material, medicinal resources, biochemicals like the ornamental resources and genetic resources. Now, regulating services, climate regulation, natural hazards regulation, purification and detoxification of water, air and soil, water and water flow, erosion and soil fertility, pollination, pest and disease regulation. Cultural services, opportunities for recreation and tourism, aesthetic value, inspiration for the arts, information for education and research, spiritual and religious experience, cultural identity and heritage, mental well-being and health. Supporting services, ecosystem process maintenance, life cycle maintenance, biodiversity maintenance and protection. How do anthropogenic activities affect the ecosystem services? Now, we all exploit the ecosystem more than that of our needs. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment in 2005 found that over the past 50 years, humans have changed the ecosystem more rapidly and extensively than in any comparable period of time in human history, largely to meet rapidly growing demands for food, fresh water, medicine, timber, fiber, and fuel. Here in this image, you can see that the indirect drivers of change like demography, economic factors including the globalization, trade, market and policy framework, and the socio-political factors like the governance, institutional and legal framework. Science and technology and cultural and religious factors. The direct drivers of change, the changes in the local land use and cover, species introduction or removal, technology adaptation and use, external inputs like the fertilizers, pest control and irrigation, harvest and resource consumption, climate change, natural, physical and biological drivers like the evolution and the volcanoes. All these contribute to the ecosystem services provisioning like the food, water, fiber and fuel. Regulating services like the climate regulation, water regulation and disease regulation. Cultural factors like the spiritual, aesthetic, recreational and education. Supporting factors which helps in the essential soil formation. All these contribute to the human well-being and poverty reduction, like the basic material supply for a good life, good health, good social relationships, security and freedom of choice and action. All these can be local, regional or global, which may be a short term or a long term. All these contributes to the management of ecosystem services. Generally, the following human activities disturb or re-engineer an ecosystem every day. The habitat destruction, which results in the animals to migrate from one place to another. The deforestation, overgrazing and erosion of soils. The deforestation causes habitat loss, climate change, mass extinction and soil erosion. Introduction of non-native species. We must know what is native species. Native species is occurring within their natural range. Non-native species introduced from somewhere else into a new area. The invasive species or the non-native species is otherwise called the introduced species, non-indigenous species, exotic species, alien species, foreign species. These non-native organisms cause or have a potential to cause harm to the environment, the economy or the human health. The overharvesting of the plant materials results in the barren land or loss of fertile soil and the pollution of land, water and air. You can see in the images below, where the pollution of land, the release of lot of combustible gases into the atmosphere, the release of effluents into the water which can pollute the water, and the pollution of the soil by plastic and waste materials as well as non-biodegradable materials. Runoff pesticides, fertilizers and human and animal waste. Runoff is the movement of the above waste in water over a sloping surface. They are also bound to eroding the soil and carried to other places because of erosion. Runoff can also occur when water is added to a field faster than it can be absorbed in the soil. Runoff can pollute the streams, ponds, lakes and wells. You can see in the images below where the pollution of the water results in runoff. What is ecosystem resilience? Ecosystem is damaged by the disturbances from the fire, flood, predation, infection, drought, etc. Removing a great amount of biomass. However, ecosystem is endowed with the ability to resist the damage and recover quickly. This ability of the ecosystem is called ecosystem resilience or ecosystem robustness. Here in this image you can see the general resilience, which is due to the environmental characteristics like the climate, topography and the soils. ecosystem attributes and processes like the abiotic and the biotic factors, and the disturbance of the ecosystem and the anthropogenic factors, which also contributes to the spatial resilience. The spatial resilience may be due to the landscape composition because of abundance and diversity of the habitat classes, and landscape configuration because of the habitat patch size, complexity, isolation, contrast, dispersion, contagion and connectivity, etc. These resilience factors helps us to produce new policies, goals and actions to protect our ecosystems. How to protect the ecosystem? It is a practice of protecting ecosystem at individual, organizational and government levels for the benefit of both nature and humans. Threats to ecosystems are many, like adverse human activities, global warming, pollution, etc. Hence, if we change our everyday lifestyle, we can help to protect the planet and its ecosystem. The 5 threats to biodiversity are shown here in this image. The land and sea use change, including the habitat loss and degradation. Example, agricultural land use, which is responsible for 80% of the global deforestation. Pollution makes the environment unsuitable for survival directly and indirectly. Species overexploitation. Example, overfishing, which may decimate global fish pollution by 2050. Climate change, forcing the animal to shift, change or confounding the signals that trigger seasonal events and more. Invasive species and disease compete with native species for space, food and other resources, sometimes spread disease that native species have no immunity of. If we fail to protect the environment, we will fail to save posterity. Therefore, we have to practice the following in our day-to-day life. Buy and use only eco-friendly products and recycle them. Grow more trees. Choose sustained farm products like the vegetables, fruits and greens, etc., which are organic. Reduce the use of natural resources. Recycle the waste and reduce the amount of waste you produce. Reduce consumption of water and electricity. Reduce or eliminate the use of household chemicals and pesticides. Maintain your cars and vehicles properly in order to reduce the carbon emission. Create awareness and educate about the ecosystem protection among your friends and family members and ask them to find out a solution to minimize this problem. Go green. It refers to the changing of one's lifestyle for safety and benefits of the environment. Reduce, reuse, recycle, way to go green and save green. Close the tap when not in use. Switch off the electrical gadgets when not in use. Never use plastics and replace them with biodegradable products. Always use eco-friendly technology and products. Use ecosystem, but don't lose ecosystem. Make it sustainable. Now let us move on to the ecosystem management. What is it? It's a process that integrates ecological, socio-economic and institutional factors into a comprehensive strategy in order to sustain and enhance the quality of the ecosystem to meet current and future needs. Ecosystem management emphasizes on human role in judicious use of ecosystem and for sustained benefits through minimal human impacts on the ecosystems. Environmental degradation and biodiversity loss will result in depletion of the natural resources, ultimately affecting the existence of human. By 2025, at least 3.5 billion people, nearly 50% of the world's population, are projected to face water scarcity. This is the report of the IUCN, International Union of Conservation of Nature. Forests house approximately 50% of global biodiversity, and at least 300 million people are dependent on forest goods and services to sustain their livelihood. This is also a report of IUCN. Here in this Venn diagram, you can see that the ecosystem management depends upon the ecological issues like the data, concepts, understanding, models, scientific responsibilities. Socioeconomic issues like the values, interests, assets, models, private sector responsibilities. Institutional issues like the law, police, authority, assets, public sector responsibilities. What is the strategy of ecosystem management? It is used to maintain the biodiversity of the ecosystems. It helps in indicating the damaged ecosystem. Some species indicate the health of the ecosystem. Such species are called as flagship species. It is used to recognize the inevitability of the ecosystem change and plan accordingly. It is one of the tools used for achieving sustainability of ecosystem through sustainable development programs or projects. It is also helpful in identifying the ecosystems which are in need of rehabilitation. It involves collaborative management with the government agencies, local population, communities, and NGOs, non-governmental organizations. It is used to build the capacity of local institutions and community groups to assume responsibility for long-term implementation of ecosystem management activities even after completion of the project. One model of the urban ecosystem, Adiyar Punga, is located in Chennai and covers an area around a total of 358 acres of Adiyar Creek and estuary, of which 58 acres were taken up for the eco-restoration under the auspices of the government of Tamil Nadu. It is maintained by the Chennai Rivers Restoration Trust (CRRT). This was a dumping site previously. Presently, it has 6 species of mangroves, about 170 species of littoral and tropical dry evergreen forests, which have successfully established as a sustainable ecosystem. Restoration of plants species have brought other associated fauna such as butterflies, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and other mammals of the ecosystem. Here in this image above, you can see the Adiyar Eco Park phase 1 was done. Later on, below you can see the image of phase 2, where it has been well developed for the walking as well as for the green Adiyar Punga. Currently, Adiyar Punga functions as an environmental education center for school and college students and the public. The entire area stands as one of the best examples for urban eco-restoration in the state of Tamil Nadu. In this image, you can see the Adiyar Punga well developed with the flora and the fauna. So today in ecosystem part 3, we discussed about the functions of the ecosystem part 2 regarding decomposition, nutrient cycles, types of ecosystem, ecosystem services, and ecosystem management. So thank you. Kindly subscribe, like, share, and comment our channel readmedprep Academy. Log on to www.readmedprepacademy.com for UG and PG MCQs. Our Facebook ID is readmedprep Academy. Our email is readmedprepacademy@gmail.com. Our Instagram is readmedprep Academy. Kindly post your questions in the comment box. We will reply with appropriate answers. Thank you very much.